have some contingency plans. I've written on scrolls.
Oh
This
my
is plan
goodness.
A2.
This is Conspiracy Theorist in a nutshell.
This is plan J2.
This is literally the starter pack. Wait, sorry, let me get this on film.
Here's plan A.
Okay.
Plan A2.
And why are these under figurative lock and key rolled up in a little parchment?
They're contingency plans. If things go south, I simply open it up and there's instructions on what to do. I've made multiple life plans depending on if one works out or if this happens, open this one. So that if something does happen, I'm not like, oh my god, what am I going to do?
Why don't you just do the old string on a corkboard
if
thing?
I get fired, which happened, right?
Yeah. Did you have a scroll for that?
There was a scroll for that, correct.
And where did that take you?
Here I am.
Here's just a little bit of context for the bonus podcast that you're about to hear. This was totally unplanned. We recorded this the same day as the season finale, and I got to talk to two former guests at the same time who I feel like kind of share the common thread of maybe having slightly misrepresented themselves on their past episodes, multiple past episodes each. Some of you might remember Corey Schaeffer, who was on in all 3 seasons and during the summer. No, 2 seasons and during the summer. He is best known, well, for a number of things, really. First, he talked about having eaten nothing but snack foods and Kool-Aid for, I think, 6 weeks. We've mentioned that he tried to stock the lake with goldfish, and that he's a Bigfoot believer, or at least was at one point. So a lot of standout accolades for Corey, in addition to his most recent episode being about his cancellation from YouTube. So that's why we're calling this episode Corey Schaeffer Redeemed. But we're also going to hear first from Josh Patton, who was on twice this past summer. And the first time, I would say that he made a lot of extraordinary claims. That doesn't mean they were outright false, but they were impossible to really confirm or deny, it seemed. And I was maybe too open-minded about it, to the point of maybe sounding agreeable, which I was trying to be agreeable. But after the fact, since we are friends, I decided that maybe the most beneficial thing for both of us would be to talk plainly about it in a way that can't necessarily happen in the course of a podcast, and to sort of challenge him on it. And I think that that's kind of actually what he wanted, was a little bit of pushback. And you can hear the difference in the second episode that we did. First of all, you can tell that he was experimenting a lot with ideas, so that alone provides some context. And he outright retracts some of the claims that he made, or at least expresses some regret for saying them. So now, a few months later, I think that they both are able to give, I talked about retrospectives in the last kind of the finale episode, and I think it's safe to say that they can be a little bit more objective about themselves at this point than they were in that very moment. I mean, my point kind of has been, you never fully know yourself, and down the line you may get a more or less accurate picture depending on how honest you're willing to be with yourself. And both of these guys, if nothing else, are very honest, very, very open books. I'd say if they were any more transparent, they would cease to exist. So, and I really appreciate that. And I think that we kind of got straight to the point to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time, relatively speaking. So it didn't take much editing, and I saw no reason not to post this, even though I said that I was done. I did make the exception for way extra. So whatever we end up calling this, this, I think, is a soundbite worth listening to with myself, Joshua Patton, and Corey Schaeffer. Enjoy. So, Josh, we did 2 summer sessions. You were back-to-back guest on unofficial episodes of the podcast. Maybe there'll be official episodes of whatever podcast I launch next, because they were entirely kind of my brand. But first time around, you talked about why you feel a calling to be a prophet. Next time around, you said you regretted saying it.
Oh.
It was one of the quickest turnarounds in viewpoint on things, because I think you were very frantic to kind of complete a lot of thoughts that were maybe still rather half baked.
Yeah. It's the perfectionism. It's the desire to be like to
express yourself perfectly.
To a degree, I wanted to wait to start to be on a podcast or do anything along those lines until I had perfected my understanding and view of things. But then on further realizing that I kind of recanted that in the sense, because I was like, wait, I don't know exactly what I'm saying. I don't know if I exactly believe everything that I'm speaking, and I don't want to be seen for that. And then now I'm at a state where actually I'm glad that I said that, because I wasn't trying to filter it. I was just being myself, if you will, with my thoughts. And that's the very thing that is so good about that, entire first podcast, is I just viewed it as talking. I didn't think about it in terms of this is being recorded eternally and you can play it back. I've never played back any of my conversations or anything really that I've ever done. I don't play it back. I have no idea what I look like. When I started to record myself when I sent it to you for the movie, it was like I was watching it and then I was so utterly embarrassed by how I looked, and I'm I look like such a weird person and all this other stuff.
Because that's because you got in performance mode, because that's what you thought that I was doing. But I think what you're referring to going into the podcast was a healthy caution, because you're going from that I have nothing on record to I'm putting something on record. But then the more you do it, the more you realize that you're never saying anything perfectly. You become able to let go of that a little bit. And I think I've been on a journey of my own too, where I've started to realize that I'm not ever going to express anything exactly right. It always feels like I'm just one good episode or one good production away from being satisfied with my creative output. And I think I'm actually getting to a point where maybe I realize that I've overemphasized myself as a creator, an expresser, a speaker, and that I need to reel that back in a little bit, because it's not so fundamentally different from just living and observing. Categorically speaking, creation isn't what we do. We reconstruct, and when you go on the mic like that, it can sort of feel like nothing but risk sometimes. But the value of being able to go back and hear yourself or watch yourself, dude, I have probably changed the most by doing that as compared to anything else. Observing myself in real time pales in comparison to watching myself back on film or listening back to a podcast, just to realize how much things change.
Yeah, it's so different being in a world, because imagine living, even just 100 years ago, you could not, or the average person at least, could not re-listen to anything that they ever said before. And now we have the opportunity to where if we wanted to, we could functionally re-listen to any and everything that we say if we, just put record on. And it's that the idea of what you remember out of the things that you said and what were said to you is so very, very different from how it actually was.
Yeah.
That it calls into question your ability to even remember. And then you're thinking about, what was I thinking when I said this? And then you realize how conscious even am I when I'm speaking, and I think that I'm being conscious of my speech.
Yep.
That afterwards looking at it, you're like, how could I have consciously come to this same thought process? How was I? It almost feels like you were a different person and you're listening to someone else. And it really takes the whole view of self and pulls it away a little bit, because you see behind the veil of the lie that you tell yourself all the time.
Exactly.
You're convinced that you have this, if only others saw it my way, it would make so much sense. I've done that so many times. And then I later realize, oh wait, I'm an idiot. Of course that this other way is the correct way to view it. And it's but but they're probably doing the same thing, and everyone's doing that all the time, and it really takes a hit to the whole perception of individuality of the culture that we live in. And other cultures have this very lack of individuality, or not lack of. They have an intentional,
a more collective mindset.
Yes,
Yeah.
an
They're part of a
intentionally
machine.
more, yeah. And so it's just so fascinating to me, because I so strongly disagree with that sentiment of the community structure, while I also find myself completely agreeing with it simultaneously, and I wonder if they do the same.
Well, let's get back into the cultural aspect of it, but I just want to kind of cap this, because we're, at the end of this season of, well, not just a season, but my life season of podcasting. And I don't constantly go back and listen to episodes, though I do go when it feels like far enough removed. I'll go back and kind of just hear how I sounded before, but most of the re-listening comes through the editing process. And, it'll be less than a day from the time I recorded, and I'm hearing something where the guest is talking, and I know that I was thinking about what I'm going to say next, because you have to do that as a host. It's not a perfectly natural conversation. You're doing the best you can to simulate that. And I realized that because I was in my head about how to make a good transition, I was completely missing what they were saying, misunderstood what they were saying completely, and maybe missed a chance to bounce off of a way better point than I had in my own head. I'm like, I was fundamentally not there until now, with a different kind of set of ears. I'm hearing what they really were saying. No doubt I talked too much, but felt better than silence. And I think in the post-podcast era of my life, I'm going to enjoy some silence.
Silence has always been a tricky one for me, because I can never truly be silent. Like, even when I'm not speaking, in my head, I hear things. Like my thoughts are passing by, and so many of them so fast. And it's like, when I talk, I'm trying to get all of these things to speak them out. And so, like, when I was a kid, it was to the point where when I would write, I would skip letters. Like, I would write a T and then just forget the rest of the word the, and then continue.
Yeah.
And it was a normal thing to just have these gaps.
I do that in my speech, too.
And yes, exactly. I do the same thing in my speech, and it's annoying because I have to so carefully articulate things sometimes, and then I have to focus on trying to articulate it to the point that I lose the focus on what I was originally saying, and like then I think that maybe I'm stupider than I think I am, because I can't even keep with a conversation and remember the points that were just said like 2 seconds ago, and it's like can't even keep the thoughts together in a cohesive pattern for long enough to even complete the smallest of sentences.
Or maybe you're just very focused on the pattern of your own narrative and applying it to yourself, because we're all doing that to some extent, and then we're kind of reaching out to try to make it mutually constructive, but we are worried about how we can pack it into our own structure of self as we define it to ourselves. What else? I was going to say something else along those lines, though. When you first started off, what was the first thing you said just now?
The exact point I was making. No, and it makes you feel like an idiot.
Think about what I was going to say. Oh, man. Well, I guess that's it.
Dang it. Dude, it makes me wonder how, when Joe Rogan, he's on those 3-hour podcasts, you're like, how does he not lose track?
Because he's reached a point where he doesn't really care too much. So, okay, that brings me back. There was a time in my life when my compulsion to say everything I thought was stronger than it is now, because I hadn't said anything substantial yet. And there's this awful kind of middle ground of knowing that you have something unique to say and it's not quite ready, but you don't know it's not quite ready. You feel that you're inching above your peers a little bit, so you're like, I need to be the loudest one in the room. But your thoughts are also yet to experience some fundamental reversals that will happen once they're cooked to perfection. So you're probably actually the worst person to be vocalizing until you kind of hit those higher levels. And I guess to some extent you kind of know when you're there, but not entirely. And there was, it's hard to say what the exact turning point was. There was a few different turning points where it was like, okay, I've actually said something now, something that I would stand by, I think, as being integral to myself, whether it was a fictional, story or a podcast or a whatever I was doing that just, I think the biggest one was that poem that I wrote, the tech fiction one, that it was just like I said something that was, even if it wasn't about what it means literally, it was just, okay, I expressed myself. And so I think getting to a point where I don't have to verbalize everything comes through the path of having verbalized a lot of things. There was a creative energy to be satiated, and that really, it took some time and it took a lot of failure. So that's why it's so frustrating to have people get canceled for careless things that they say, which sometimes are a reflection of irreparable character, sometimes. But in a lot of cases, it's like when you have said enough things, it only makes sense that the worst of those things would be pretty bad, and would be subject to change, and so there should be some grace given where that doesn't seem to be the overall spirit of the individual.
Giving grace is something that we do not culturally have.
It's tricky because you don't want to do it unconditionally. You want to sort of decide who is fixable and who isn't. But there's now this new virtue signaling merit in giving none whatsoever. To where it's like, will you go so far as to cancel your own, your own tribe? Yeah, a lot of times they will.
It's interesting because the world that we live in grew out of a world of, think of old time politics, the leader doesn't get elected, they get murdered, and the next one gets put in. That was how the world worked, right? For so long, that's how we functioned, because and our culture and society was based on that.
Right.
And then now it's like, instead of literally stabbing someone in the throat, you do a Tulsi Gabbard, what she did to Kamala Harris. We just shanked her a couple times on stage.
Well, yeah, because now you might be some peasant who doesn't have the platform to send out a viral tweet. Or back then, you if you're some peasant, you're not going to have the platform to send out a viral tweet and shank them that way. So you're like, if I can just sneak in there once, I get 15 seconds to make a difference. Might as well kill the guy.
No.
It's gonna become pretty binary at that point. What your footprint is. Where now everything is just about the digital footprint.
Dude, it's so fascinating to me watching how people it's almost like a gladiatorial. It feels almost like it's an actual arena, and there's actual almost blood behind it to a certain degree. When you see when Trump was on his rise against the people in the GOP, that was just, he was it was going for blood. It felt like an actual blood sport that you could participate in, and you're watching it, and it's at least to me that's how it felt. It felt you're well, who is this gladiator going to knock down and just stab to death in front of all of us? And
we're gonna be getting it again. We haven't cycled out of that.
Oh, I know, and that's the thing. Is so fascinating.
We might get one that's so bloody it becomes an example for all of history. True catalyst for okay, what have we become? If 2016 wasn't that, it should have been that. Apparently, we need one more.
We do. I firmly believe
because we clearly haven't exemplified that we are ready to substantially change anything.
That was the point that I was making to you earlier.
Yeah. And
it's that I think that reaching near that breaking point, because it's a thing where when people don't know when too far is too far, and I think I think since it's post World War II, we don't know what it's like to send over and have friends and family dying constantly, and the ones that come back are in pieces, and the ones that aren't in pieces are mentally in pieces. And it's like, just the effect that has on a culture. You're like, whoa, how about we have none of this war stuff? Let's please back down on it. Whereas, like, we are in a we're in a time where we don't have that, like, bloodlust satiated. We don't know how bad it hurts. And so I think, to a degree, I think things will continue until there's some kind of point that leads to a conflict. And then it's only once we realize the damage of that conflict that we're able to dial it back to the way that it before, where maybe it should be, But what I'm afraid of is to what degree, and maybe should we push it to be sooner so that it's not as bad? Or, like, you think of what Teddy Roosevelt did. Teddy Roosevelt sought out to, like, have war because he knew that's what the people were going to after. They wanted that, and, like, that's where they were going, and it's going to get worse if you wait. And so, to a degree, he kind of was like, hey, how about let's stir things up? Let's get it started. And then it was like, hey, like, we realize how bad this is. We realize, actually, no, we don't like this as much as we think we do. And then you back down again, and you have, like, maybe a period of peace. And the thing is, the time spent between wars is increasing as, like, history moves on. It was like war is constant to now war occurs, and then we have the longest stretch of non official war. We have these, like, proxy wars like we do with China and, like, all these other countries, but, like, full scale wars, what I'm talking about, because you could argue that we're in war with other countries, like, on the digital scale, but that full blown, like, physical violence warfare, I think that whenever it occurs, the only way it doesn't destroy us is if it's a small enough conflict to where it can end up being contained, where we say, wait, how about we stop whatever we're doing and recognize we don't want to do this? None of us do. And let's go back to, like, peace. And then there's the question of, does it go too far?
I don't foresee a point when none of us do. I think conflict is pretty well in the human nature. I do think we're going to see a future with a much clearer historical retrospective, where they're going to look back on us, even those digital footprints that we're so proud of, and see right through us, and even kind of uphold these. There'll be these day-to-day archetypes, these people who embodied something in a future meme sort of way, where they say, from kind of a psychological angle, here's what this guy was. Here's why he said these things and did these things. He's a perfect example of a this. Whether that is, like, in my tech phi, some kind of spectrum of categorization or whatever it is. They're gonna point to people who were examples of conformity or non-conformity and everywhere in between, and we're gonna be like these specimens, these digital fossils of a time when we thought we knew it all, and we were just absolutely perfectly preserved in the muck of social media. And that's
so good.
I kind of expect to become like a museum artifact with my 0 follower Twitter account, where the Twitter is really just a scratch board of terrible ideas, but by putting random stuff on that wall and seeing what sticks, which most of it doesn't, but I anticipate future man seeing it all quite differently.
The digital fossil. That's really striking at the core of what it really is. Like, it's
That's
like
why people
Facebook.
say I'm a
Facebook is
dinosaur.
approaching the point of, like, being more of an obituary than it is something for living people, because more people will be dead than there are alive on the platform.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, what is this
not
becoming?
to keep referencing my own work, but I wrote an audiobook form of this poem before I really reduced it to its essence. And in it, one of the concepts that I envisioned was, like, the future of the funeral home. Because we've run out of space to really, we don't want to use physical space for graveyards. And so that we create these, like, memorial spaces that are largely digital, but where we still want there to be a tactile element. So there are these, like, high rises filled with embodiments of that person's history in the digital sphere, and you can just sort of walk through it like this museum of humanity, and you're scrolling through screens to look at the people, and then that is what gives way to the technology that where they look at each other and see all of their present through a screen. You should check it out. Nobody's ever listened to the stuff that I wrote, but it's all in my
That is actually
history.
Insane.
And then they go from that brand being called like as a pun for interred, to then this social network that's called interconnected, because it's all one big thing. People looking for significance, thinking, and with AI and stuff, imagining how their legacy will be carried on. So they call it a legacy home. But in the present moment, they're trying to establish that legacy as firmly and digitally as they possibly can.
That's a pretty good concept.
Yeah.
It feels like a Black Mirror episode. It feels exactly like that.
I mean, Black Mirror is good because Black Mirror is life. I haven't even watched a lot of it, but I respect.
Yeah, I haven't
based on what
either.
I've seen.
I want to watch more. I just never end up doing it.
And as I was writing, this was a few years ago, I started writing it before augmented reality was even mainstream. I didn't even know about it, and I'd written it into this story. And then every time I had a good idea, something new that I wrote, then some either teen fiction or sci-fi movie would come along, or Black Mirror would do something that I had just written. And I was like, well, now I look unoriginal. But you know what? Nothing's original.
Yeah, nothing is.
It's all restructuring. Yeah. And once I realized that in my own personal history of creations, I would go back constantly and realize that I had absolutely ripped off South Park. Unashamedly, because I didn't know I was doing it. That was what kind of got me to a point of realizing that's what everything is. Everything is a rehashing. And I'm a pretty good rehashing machine. That's why I'm calling myself a creator. But I'm not. I'm part of the big machine, and there's a certain piece that comes from realizing that. It's not futility, it's not meaninglessness. It's actually, great, I can relax and not worry about promoting my own ego. And so I just want people to understand that when I promote things that I've made or done, I'm not even trying to be egotistical about it. This brain came up with it, but I just... I mean, literally, I'm a determinist. I don't know, why would I take credit for anything? Or I'm even kind of a panpsychist, dude. I just, it's, I guess, taking credit in the sense that we distribute reward and judgment. But I'm not trying to promote myself, because I don't care as much about how I feel as what I put out in the world. I am a vessel, I guess. That's the thing I've come to accept and embrace. Here I am talking again. Corey's ready. Oh, there he is.
Do I want to participate?
Yeah, dude, you're welcome to. You won't be disappointed. Yeah, buddy.
Matthew, dear Tom.
My man Josh Patton is here too.
Hey.
Hello.
Big fan. He's a big fan of you.
Yes, I've listened to all of your podcasts.
Aren't they all? Hey, dude, you are looking fine right now in that Christmas seasonal sweater.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. If I didn't know better, I think you were happy.
Getting there.
Getting close to happiness?
Little bloop, and then gonna go back.
What do we have to thank for the happy spikes?
Change of scenery.
Okay, tell me more. Update me on your life as if I know nothing, because we might just record this.
Well, as you know, I was recently let go from a
He
job
says with
that
finger
I
quotes.
both enjoyed and made good money at. Surprise, let go. So then I didn't quite know what to do. I was stuck in a small town in Southern Virginia where I knew nothing, nobody, and had no prospects. So, Friday I just moved down here to Wake Forest, which for those who don't know is the northern part of Raleigh. Have an apartment now. I just started the training process to become a financial advisor for Junary Financial.
Okay.
I'm currently taking one of my courses. I'll be done in a couple days. And then I will be making the money. And right now I'm doing Uber in the meantime to stave off creditors.
I mean, dude, I was telling you for a while. I was like, you just need a side hustle, like even if it's something that feels beneath you. It's the grind.
It is a grind. It's not so bad. I make decent money and I work whenever I want. I can literally just turn off.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely. It's the way to be. If you got a car that's within the last 10 years, my model is not.
I was gonna say, that would be a nice, hustle for you.
Right, right. Well, I was thinking I might maybe apply the Uber model to just doing random favors for people. Like I just strap a GoPro on my head and it'd be like, hey, you want me to do your grocery shopping? You just put in a little Bluetooth, be like, hey, tell me what to do.
They do have Uber Eats and stuff, which I don't believe has a car restriction thing where you just deliver food.
Yeah.
Glorified pizza delivery.
Right. Yeah, some of those food delivery things have a tipping model where they manage to sort of rob you of your actual wages in the same way the restaurant industry does, and then take a percentage of your tips and all this kind of unethical garbage that I want nothing to do with.
I get tipped pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard good things. What are you snacking on there?
Dried mango.
Dried mango. Wow, you are living like the Aldi. Yeah, living like a king. Dried mango.
To realistically, kings of the past, they never had the opportunity to even eat a mango, much less a dried one.
Asian kings did. Checkmate.
So is that how you picture yourself? You're like Genghis Khan, popping dried mangoes while essentially out of work.
That's my official title. Corey Schaeffer, Sultan of Brunei.
So walk us through the emotional ups and downs of the months since Corey Schaeffer was canceled from YouTube, and effectively your trajectory towards fame took a sudden dip.
I was on a roll. I was getting places. I wasn't PewDiePie level yet, but it kind of feels like what it's like to live in a country that doesn't have full free speech.
Okay.
Because I effectively cannot communicate with larger audiences than people who can't hear my voice.
Right.
In a room or something. YouTube pretty much having a monopoly on the self-broadcasting service.
Yeah.
Especially one that involves visuals.
Just the other day, or just a few weeks ago, somebody was doing a podcast with Alex Jones, your man Alex Jones, and talking about how he kind of views YouTube as a bit of a conspiracy, or at least to the extent that he said, and I quote, "They're not getting deleted from YouTube for telling the truth." And you know who that person was? I'll give you a clue. He's in a little bit of hot water right now, and
Trump.
Clue number 2, you got banned from Twitter for calling him a little bitch.
T-Pain?
Nope.
Was it?
It's a different T. T.I.
Yeah, T.I. That's right.
Yeah, so he's on your side now. He's on your side now. Oh, and he said he's looking for a diehard racist to talk to, so
Wow.
don't know if you're interested.
Corey Schaeffer does not condone racism by any standard.
Okay, but what if... All right, here's the deal. For the record, Corey Schaeffer, I consider you a friend. Maybe... I'll put it this way. I'm not going to ever say that I'll unconditionally stand by everything you ever say.
So you don't believe in Bigfoot? Or you do?
Well, that's going to be an epistemological question.
Bigfoot must exist. The evidence is out there, people. Wake up, sheeple.
Josh Patton over here is not disappointed.
We could say I wanted to participate in this particular podcast because I very much like listening to you speaking. But from my perspective, it seems like you have had a perspective extremely similar to the one that I held in general about the world at large. But then you had a couple of experiences which totally shattered that for you. Like, for example, you referenced the mountain lion and how, like, you know, you saw a mountain lion and how, like, you know, it seems to me at least like that, you know, that experience of seeing that, you know, maybe things aren't the way that they seem.
Or that the government says they are.
Yeah, or that the government says that they are. And it seems like you were like, oh, well, maybe they're wrong about all of these other things. And then as you begin to research, you're like, oh, wait, they were wrong about this and this and this and this and this. And then you realize they're doing all these unethical things everywhere. And I think maybe you took it a little bit too far and were a little bit too loose with your standards.
Or not far enough.
We'll find out soon enough.
So we'll say, like, you know, with...
I was canceled.
Yeah, so when it comes to, like, Bigfoot, for example, I think that it's pretty clear with most of the things. Well, okay, so first we'll talk about the burden of evidence for these things. So generally speaking, you're taking like a 1%. You're like, you know, okay, yes, I realize 99.99% of these Bigfoot claims are actually false. Okay, and we can prove that they're false through various means, but this one particular one is actually true. And the people do the same thing with, like, you know, the alien theories or, like, you know, a lot of the other conspiracy theories. And so I guess, you know, I fear that you've taken that, you know, maybe you're looking at, like, you know, oh, hey, we can't explain this tiny portion of them, and, like, you know, using that as a descriptor for the rest. Because I tend to do the same thing. You know, with other things, like I have, you know, I don't mean to, like, you know, put thoughts into your head about, like, you know, crazy
Should I cite one?
So no, I'm gonna cite this. Okay. I'll cite it. So
he's not totally convinced that Michelle Obama is, shall we say, gender binary.
My father has that theory.
So it's just one of those things where, like, you know, I kind of convinced myself to a degree because I just disbelieve in the government at large so hard that I'm like, you know, oh, well, it would make more sense that they would lie than they would tell the truth. And so, like, you know, I ended up taking, but if you actually look at the evidence for it, realistically, you can explain away, like, pretty much all of it. And, you know, the remaining that you can't quite explain away, it's like, well, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But taking the position...
Down 6 inches, you can't explain.
Well, yeah, but taking the position that, like, you know, I am certain that she is actually a dude, like, you know, that's entirely too far based on the evidence that there is, and that's going into presumption. And I would say the same thing with, like, you know, either aliens or Bigfoot is, like, you know, there are some inconsistencies, but going so far as to say that I'm certain that that is real is maybe going a step too far based on what the evidence is. And so that's where I disagree with you on those points, but I know where you're coming from.
And we've got another shockingly delightful Corey Schaeffer episode. Delightfully shocking, should I say.
Say this. I believe that maybe 10 to 15% of Bigfoot cases are either unexplainable or somewhat credible. They cannot be easily just dismissed or explained away.
So
it would be a higher percent.
So but it frustrates you if someone dismisses something that is probably not true simply because it still, you think,
it's socially just
Could-
that's not a thing. Offhanded dismissal of
I guess that's the phenomenon that we're talking
Okay.
about here.
Yeah, no, I
Where
can
you-
agree that the just offhanded discarding of something is maybe not a good thing at large.
Because potentially the most significant truth could be found in the exceptional case, or in fact would be found.
If one person
But-
actually saw Bigfoot, then he's real.
Right, but I still think those the videos that you were citing were entirely unconvincing, and that the burden of proof was on the people making them. We haven't talked about Bob Lazar, have we? That all broke since
Yeah.
our last
we did
talk.
talk about it. Either in person or
I don't actually remember where you stood on it. That and maybe the other guy in the U.S. Navy, I think, who got video of a craft that he thought was alien. And both of these stories kind of got co-opted by different members of the media, or documentarians, I think. So I don't know if that helps or hurts the credibility. But yeah, what was your take?
Well, I was a big fan of the Let's Raid Area 51.
Yes, a beautiful demonstration.
I played the Naruto running in there myself. Ninja star. And that people actually did show up.
Yeah, not very many. Like,
To humanity.
yeah, the most committed of our ironic friends.
I thought that at the bare minimum, the Salazar, how's his name said?
Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar is bare minimum a very good storyteller, and it's impressive enough that he's able to have all these things connected.
Yeah. If he's a storyteller and a liar, then he's also got a superhuman grasp of human psychology and how to manipulate by acting low key rather than high strung.
Yeah.
I mean, it would
bare
be.
minimum, he's a very good liar.
But there's also very, like, as with the case of Jesus Christ, very little room between liar and superhuman truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a certain faith leap there, and I think that I've only listened to his one Joe Rogan. I think it was his Joe Rogan one. Yeah, his Joe Rogan talk.
The Netflix special adds a lot more. I gotta say that.
Airtight.
I'm sorry.
Or
Go repeat that.
Not disprovable,
Okay.
or easily disprovable at least. And I was paying close attention, looking for him to slip up.
Right.
Basically, because I, for myself, do not believe in extraterrestrial life. So.
But-
I'm waiting for, okay, where's he going to make his mistake? He's going to make one.
You're doing the same disservice that you resent in other people, where you said you went to it with "I do not believe in." Do you mean you're not convinced of?
Every Bigfoot video, everything, I'm always looking for the inconsistency or the error in fact or logic or something.
Okay.
That
As you
is
should.
why when I process stuff, I'm more sure of things than if I just I believe. So I was waiting for him to make mistakes. It took a very long time, almost at least 75% through his talk for me to come up with one thing that seemed good enough to throw doubt onto his talk. I mean, a lot of stuff he says you couldn't prove either way. I saw this flying saucer here, but they go invisible when they're in the sky. Well, there's a flying spaghetti monster in my garage, right? So the one thing that I remember that really stuck out as this could possibly be the thing is he talked about how he learned where the star of one of the aliens is at. And he said that someone told him, or anyways, he found this out. And then he said, then he went home and he looked it up.
Yeah.
And found out where that star was at. and that it was some obscure star that no one had ever really heard of. But he's talking about this in like, what was it, like the 70s or 80s? Back when the internet, you couldn't just look something up. Looking something up back then meant going to a dictionary. And not everybody has star charts and everything.
But he cited a very
star names.
He cited a very particular exclusive kind of book that most people would not have.
If he had said that, I might.
He did.
He said I had this particular book.
Re-listen to it. He really emphasized that deeply, as if to anticipate that argument.
That either I didn't hear that part or whatever. I'd have to.
But now that rings a bell. I think we did have this conversation because I remember that being one of your big points, which is an interesting one because it didn't really even register for me.
You gotta look for stuff that's not.
And with of course, that means that there's.
I saw Bigfoot and Abraham Lincoln shaking hands. Yeah, you gotta look for little tiny things that wait on.
We have video footage that was posted on the internet back in the 1800s of Abraham Lincoln shaking hands with Bigfoot.
Oh, turns out it was just Grover Cleveland.
My favorite meme on that is Abraham Lincoln. It's a quote by Abraham Lincoln that says, "Don't trust everything you read on the internet."
Yeah,
it's like, yes,
always good.
The perfect example.
I mean, look, when I saw Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, I was like, alternate history, or I mean, it's pretty cohesive. I wanted to believe. I understand the wanting to believe. I almost convinced myself that Santa was real. But no, you know what? The reason sometimes it comes down to examining your own psychological motives. And mine was that I wanted to go back and have that blind, childish faith that I wasn't allowed to have as a kid, because Santa was essentially a Satan conspiracy, a wolf in sheep's clothing, if you will. No resentment about that. Anyway, what else?
Did you hear about? Well, I'm sure you heard about old Epstein is still not resting in peace with the memes and the theories.
Well, let's be clear. Epstein wasn't ever supposed to rest in peace, unless you're going so far as to say he was a little nobody that got turned into an icon, but I don't think that's the case.
Well, I don't think anybody's sad that he died,
right.
But
I mean, I for one am.
It's not.
We're missing out on so much evidence that we could have gotten if he would not have suicided himself.
We just don't want him walking the streets, is what we're saying. But yeah, he. I guess. Go ahead.
So that brings us back to a little conspiracy theory. Of course, the evidence is pretty clear that it's reasonable enough to think that he possibly did not kill himself.
Although, let's just give it this. Literally speaking, there's still a good chance he killed himself, even if obviously by neglect of the guards. So let's say they're facilitating that, obviously with some level of coercion. But he may even have gone out feeling like a hero to his own tribe, desperate to kill himself. Not just out of guilt and shame, but to avail them of what he had to say.
Let's just say, I'm not for certain that the Clintons had him killed.
Oh no!
But I'm not saying the Clintons didn't have him killed.
But see, that's still picking one of a potentially unlimited pool of possibilities.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They are one of a long list of suspects. Suspects that we don't even know. But he wouldn't be the first person that would have potential evidence against the Clintons to kill themselves or to suffer a untimely end.
We're not talking about the Clintons killing themselves. No, that's not what we're saying. I get, yeah.
People just can't bear to rat on or speak out against, or they have so much shame for making up stuff about them that they either end it themselves or are.
So you think they're just very coercive to the point that people would rather die?
No,
Possibly.
no, the Clintons didn't pressure Epstein into killing himself. What the kind of conspiracy that is, like, it just, no.
Well, you're in there, but if you don't kill yourself, maybe your family, they aren't here, right?
Did the Clintons bring in his family and are like, his family's trying to convince him you need to kill yourself? Like, just going way too far.
I mean, it only takes a little bit of, what's the sleep drug?
Ambien?
Yeah, it only takes a little bit of Ambien to change the game. Make people say things that they don't feel.
Just a photo of your daughter getting home from school with just a picture of a noose on the back. That's all you need.
What? All right, this is getting weird.
You got this. You do this. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, for some reason I feel like Epstein doesn't care about his daughter.
I think the least likely suspect that everybody agrees on is Epstein himself.
No. Actually,
least
if you were
likely.
ranking individuals, because we really have very little to go off of as to what individuals are responsible, he is technically going to be the highest ranking candidate.
That's how you look.
But the fact that it is a conspiracy, that it's we'll call it a conspiracy, seems pretty likely.
I think the term conspiracy theory has been misused and changed in modern English.
Oh, terms have been dulled to the point of losing them completely. A lot of charged
It's
terms.
Conspiracy theory. You know what conspiracy theory means? That doesn't mean it's
Well,
false.
conspiracy, right? The conspiracy implies that there was a motive to achieve something else other than just raise a question.
That would be a conspiracy theory. But people say, that anyway.
Let's go around the table and rank each of our individual odds of going insane in 2020.
Pretty low.
Pretty low?
Pretty low. Just
Corey?
'cause I got a kid on the way and everything, and that changes
He's
everything.
got to. Yeah, he's got to reel it in.
I don't got a choice.
About 50%.
50%.
Either I make it or I don't.
Can you
If
break
I
down?
don't,
Yeah.
things are going to change.
Give me a whole pie chart of possibilities. 50% you go insane.
So if this financial advising thing works out and everything's hanky-dory, then everything's hanky-dory.
Hanky-dory.
If everything goes south and I feel trapped and stuck and this isn't working out, etc., etc., it'll be a one-way plane ticket sort of deal, and sell everything and move and
You're very fatalistic.
Um,
Not that I am, not philosophically, but
so
I really don't think you've got as bad a hand as you think.
Holding me here that if 2020 proves that 2021 is not going to be any better, then I'll know where I belong. But here's hoping. I'm putting my best foot forward and working on that grind, getting everything ready. So if my best fails me, then I'm in the wrong place.
But I don't think you have to resort to any extreme actions as quickly as you might be planning to. Or telling yourself you do.
With the current evidence I have,
That things can't get better. I think you're being like the Joker and resisting change.
don't get better, or they get worse.
Resisting change from within.
So
You're very resolute in the package of what you are.
let's just say I have
He opens a
couple
drawer.
things.
Show and tell time.
Here is I have some contingency plans I've written on scrolls.
Oh
This
my
is plan
goodness.
A2.
This is conspiracy theorist in a nutshell.
This is plan J2.
This is literally the starter pack. Wait, sorry, let me get this on film. Wait. Hold those up again for me.
Here's plan A.
Okay.
Plan A2.
And why are these under figurative lock and key rolled up in a little
Because
parchment?
they're contingency plans. If things go south, I simply open it up and there's instructions on what to do.
Scratch your skin with the paper and die? Okay.
I've made multiple life plans depending on if one works out or if this happens, open this one. So that if something does happen, I'm not like, oh my god, what am I going to do?
Why don't you just do the old string on a corkboard
if I
thing?
get fired, which happened, right?
Yeah. Did you have a scroll for that?
There was a scroll for that, correct.
And where did that take you?
Here I am.
Oh, move. Well, Corey, if we air this as a segment on the podcast, that will make you the first fourth-time guest, the most featured player of a non-host category, and I guess probably the most listened to.
Will there be a reward, financial or otherwise?
It's completely unmonetized at this point, just like your YouTube.
I wish it was just demonetized. I wish. No. Delete
Canceled.
the whole thing.
All right. Well, we might be canceling the whole thing anyway, so I guess you will be canceled from the podcast as well.
Overkill.
Overkill.
That's what I thought. Maybe they'll take this one down because their bots are stupid or whatever. I'll get easily appealed or whatever.
Yeah. All right. I think we're good here. I think it's a wrap. Anything else you wanted to talk about? Oh boy, the plastic sound is really.
It's so addicting.
They're mostly sugar, aren't they? Are the Aldi ones sugar coated?
It's part of the mango.
Natural. It's all. What's not natural, dude? What's not?
Monosodium glutamate.
the one unnatural substance in the universe.
Aspartame.
Aspartame. Okay. I think we're going to wrap this one so that I don't have to edit all day after I already said I was done podcasting. I officially announced my retirement from the podcast.
Oh.
Yep. Aged out of it. Got my severance package. What?
What are you going to do?
I was thinking maybe nothing. Or.
Are you going to keep janitoring?
Janiting is the word.
Oh, sorry.
I might keep doing Janet, but we'll just see how long the old clock keeps ticking.
Can always Uber.
Could always would have to buy a new car for that.
Hey, my brother is now a car salesman.
Good for him.
He buys and sells used cars.
Oh, used cars. Okay. Oh, my mom always told me I should be a used car salesman.
Dreams come true.
Dreams can come true. It wasn't my dream. Someone else's dream always comes true. That's what they say.
Can always come down to financial stuff with me.
Yeah, I would rather do something that I personally take pleasure in, like cleaning toilets. But, all right, Corey. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it was good to meet you.
Yes, you too.
Corey Schaeffer, redeemed.
Not a racist.
Not a racist. All right. Peace out, brother.